Dublab.
Welcome to the Quarantine Tapes, a daily podcast from Onassis, LA and dublab. Hosted by Paul Holdengräber, this series chronicles shifting paradigms in the era of social distancing.
Hello.
Hello, could I please speak with Rosanne Cash?
Hi, this is her.
Rosanne, this is Paul Holdengräber calling you. I'm so happy you're taking my call for these quarantine tapes, and I wish we were speaking under better circumstances. But it is a joy to speak to you.
Oh, you too, Paul. And I also wish we were speaking under better circumstances.
There really are difficult, dire, delirious times we're living through, and I'm thinking particularly about what inhabits you and what I think you've been taking a lot of time doing during these quarantine days, which is listening to songs and listening to music. And I remember that you said in your beautiful memoir, which we had occasion to talk about at the New York Public Library some years ago already, composed, you said in it, I remember, I have learned more from songs that I ever did from any teacher in school. And I'm wondering how that might apply to this moment in particular.
Well, I've been thinking about that a lot in the last 24 hours, particularly because two really important people in music died on the same day, Hal Wilner and the great John Prine. And just before you called, in fact, I was listening to some of John Prine's songs, not just to get solace from hearing his voice, because one of the great songwriters of our time has left the planet, but to learn something about keeping your heart open even through indescribable pain. And he delivers these just searing lines with a kind of compassionate matter-of-factness.
Yeah.
And I guess I want to learn more about that. I'm still crying. Actually,
I know, and
I've been crying since last night, since I heard he passed away, and I woke up crying, and I woke up crying about Prine, and then the first thing I thought is, woke up crying about Prine. Would he think that's a good line?
I think he would appreciate you wondering about that.
Well, I mean, he was a standard. I remember thinking, I've been a songwriter for 40 years, and I've thought that many times. Would John Prine think this is a good line? You know, when you're a writer, I think a lot of us have a perfect listener in mind when we're writing something. And my perfect listener and editor, internal editor, was always songwriters like him, you know, like him and John Lennon and Chris Christopherson and my dad and Lucinda Williams. You know, would they think these were good lines? That's very revealing. I just told you something that maybe is too revealing, Paul.
No, I don't think so at all. and probably also Bob Dylan. I think you mentioned Leonard Cohen. Of course, your father in many ways. But what lines in particular are you thinking about now with John Prine? What lines are reverberating for you most strongly now?
Time don't fly. It bounds and leaps. I keep thinking about that, like that our sense of time is distorted. It particularly seems distorted right now. I know 7 people who have died in the last 10 days from the virus, and 5 of them from the virus and 2 of old age. And it seems that it's an avalanche of loss, and it makes me feel that time is going too fast. You used to get time to process a loss and a death, and that's not happening right now.
Again, no. I'm quiet for a moment just because I'm taking in what you've said. You in your memoir again, you have some extraordinary lines about grief. This one in particular struck me. You say, with time the unbearable becomes shocking, becomes sad, and finally becomes poignant. Or maybe poignancy isn't the conclusion to grief. Maybe there is something beyond poignant that I haven't experienced yet.
I think I forgot something in that list.
Tell me.
Well, the memoir came out in 2010, and now it's 2020.
I know.
And I realized that there is another spot you can either stop on or you get to with grief, which is creation. John Prine being gone makes me want to write better songs. His songs will always fill up space on the planet and in our hearts. And I will regret not doing my own work if I get to the end of my life and I've spent too much time online shopping or too much time whatever.
Yeah, too much time with things that are not important. I think this virus perhaps has made people think about what matters. Perhaps. I mean, I think it's much too early to say if habits of the mind and habits of the soul and habits of ways in which people interact will really change. But there may be a shard of hope there.
Maybe. I think we've all had to allow ourselves moments to just distract ourselves and do mindless things, because it's too much. It's too much to try to live through this, process it, and then do your work and make something creative, and then deal with the guilt that you're not doing something creative. I think we have to be really kind to ourselves right now, even given what I just said about grief and creativity.
Rosanne,
it'll come.
Rosanne, in this quarantine tape series, which began really 2 weeks ago, speaking with a number of different writers and artists and political activists and all kinds of people, doctors. The word that comes to most people on these tapes now is a word.
What?
Kindness. And which has a deep etymological connection to the word, and I think Shakespeare mentions it, being of kin, which is so, whether it's...
Well, it's interesting.
Yeah, tell me.
Well, kind to ourselves first before we can be kind to anyone else, right? I mean, that sounds like pop psychology, but it's actually true. And I have been, I'm in lockdown with my husband and my son, my 21-year-old son, and it's a little harder on him than it is on us because he's 21 and he can't see his friends and he's living with his parents again after being at college for 3 years.
Yeah.
And so I've tried to be kind and go out of my way to be cheerful and give him space and everything. And I find today, after crying for 12 hours, that I need to also give myself that same extension of kindness, And you know what I was thinking of too, Paul, is that in the midst of this, there are kernels of anger. I mean, they're not that big or they don't overwhelm me, but I've talked to other people, and that feeling of anger is overwhelming. And when I feel angry, I go back to a picture I saw on the internet of a woman with enormous stacks of toilet paper going to the checkout line, and then reading about how gun sales have gone through the roof during the quarantine. And I was thinking, we're just a nation of armed asses. That's what it feels like right now.
Sorry, I had to laugh. Yeah.
Yeah,
the mixture of the toilet paper and the guns, and your comment about it. I want to go back to a moment that I've always loved, of you reading to your father when he lost his eyesight. I remember talking to you about that, and you spoke about it very movingly. And I remember at one point you were upstate and you couldn't find a Bible, and you were worried because you were going to read to your father passages from the Bible on the phone, and you couldn't find those passages because you didn't have the Bible handy. And you told him, and you said, but I have some Shakespeare. And he said, it's fine. You'll read to me when you come down and visit.
Yeah, he said, we'll wait.
And visit. And you remember that, of course.
Oh, yes. Because I'm not much of a Bible girl. I'm not religious. And so I was at upstate, you're right, and I didn't have a Bible, and he didn't want to hear Shakespeare. He loved to hear the Psalms. That's what he loved to hear. Of course, you could read to me from Shakespeare all day long, and I'd be happy.
Well, I will never forget, again, at the New York Public Library, when we took you to the special collections, and you held a folio.
Oh my God! What a moment!
And the first page was Ben Jonson, and it was Ben Jonson's copy. And you said to the librarian, you said, "Do you mean to say that I'm holding something that Ben Jonson held?" Much like, when Patti Smith held the cane of Virginia Woolf, which was found after she committed suicide. And I remember Patti saying to me, "Do you expect me to talk after this?" I mean,
I understand that feeling.
I know you do. And I remember that moment so strongly. And then, reading about that moment, and you said that your father had said this when he was in his library, "This is a room full of regrets." And I'm reminded of Susan Sontag's extraordinary line about her library, where she said, "My library is an archive of longing."
For someone who loves books and loves to read, it is longing and regret, isn't it? I mean, that's one of my regrets in advance. I'm looking at my bookshelf right now and thinking, I will never read all of these before I reach the end of my life, and how sad that is.
What are you reading for the moment?
Well, oddly, I'm reading Anthony Burgess's biography of Shakespeare.
Well, there you
Speaking of Shakespeare, I go through obsessions. I do.
Yeah.
I'm also reading Edmund White's book, The Unpunished Vice, about his life as a reader, the books that changed his life and the ones he cherishes. It makes me feel very unworthy, actually. A lot of these books he mentions, I just have no idea. It's inspiring.
I also, in reading about your relationship with your father, I was so taken by the fact that it wasn't just the Bible. He also said, as my daughter, you can't be my daughter if you don't love and read 100 Years of Solitude.
He loved Marquez, yeah.
So there you have it. You see, I mean, there's such a a panoply of interests. You were mentioning also Hal Wilner. In what way were you close to him?
I wasn't close to him, but I respected him deeply, and he was a record producer and an important figure to musicians in many ways. And the most cruel irony of his death is that his father was a Holocaust survivor.
Yes.
Who is still alive.
Oh my God.
I know. Heartbreaking.
It really is. You know, I began by saying that you had learned more from songs, perhaps, than from anything that you learned in a more formal way by going to school. And I know there's a particular song you've been listening to a lot recently, which is a song that Bob Dylan just brought out called Murder Most Foul, which in a sense is connected perhaps to your love of Larkin's poem An Arundel Tomb, where he says time has transfigured them into untruths. And I'm wondering what this song now conjures up. I feel like you're listening to it a lot.
You forgot the last line of that Larkin poem.
Tell me.
Time has transfigured them into untruth. What will survive of us is love.
Thank you.
And one of the reasons I love that poem so much is because Larkin himself was a bit misanthropic and curmudgeonly and ill-humored by all respect. I obviously didn't know him, but that's the legend, and that he wrote that song. And I'm sorry, it's not a song.
That
poem. Yeah, and that was the last line. What will survive of us is love. Dylan's Murder Most Foul. I think the reason it moved me so much, and I know some people don't like it or think it's self-indulgent, is because it chronicled my life, certainly. Artists who were important to me, shocking events in our shared history, assassinations, unrest, blips from screen, just small pieces of images. It just felt like, it scared me in a way because it felt like a coda. And then I found out that he didn't write it, in the last year, but he had written it some years ago, and I felt a little relief, like, oh, well, it's not a coda. It's, maybe he'll write a sequel to this. I think for our generation, that song is deeply meaningful. My son didn't get it, and he loves Bob, and he was like, I just don't get it at all. And I said, well, you didn't live through any of this, basically.
And maybe you will.
And maybe you will, exactly.
That's what, things change over time. And, we have a relationship to certain works of literature and music, which we loved once upon a time, and we continue to, and sometimes we don't. And sometimes we come upon things at a certain moment in our life when it is right, when we are ripe for it. So your son, 21 years old, I remember when he came, he must have been 12 or 13 when I interviewed Rick Rubin, and you were there.
Oh yeah,
and you were there in the first row. And
with him.
And I didn't know. I played Hurt, which you recall. Rick Rubin said to your father, "I don't produce, but I reduce," and he reduced that song to the essential. And I remember I didn't know you were there, and that's when we met. And your son was 13 now, and he's 21 now, and he doesn't get this song, but maybe in 10 years' time, he'll say to you, Mama, this is extraordinary.
Or he will write his own.
Right, even better.
Yeah, he's an incredibly good songwriter. I have to say, it's like he's distilled 3 generations of songwriting into himself.
How extraordinary.
Right. So I'd like to see, when he's my age, if he would write something that was a chronicle,
of
like Murder Most Foul is. You know, that night that you interviewed Rick, do you remember that he started with a meditation that I think was actually 10 minutes long? Do you remember that?
Oh, do I remember it? I remember him coming in shorts and flip-flops, literally 2 minutes before the show was to start. And he turned to me and he said, Paul, I have an idea. And I went, uh-oh. And the idea was, we will be, these 500-600 people in the room will meditate and will close our eyes for 3 minutes. And I remember it felt like 20 minutes, and I said as much. And he said to me, that's because you need it. I will never forget
I
that.
thought it was a brazen thing to do, to make a crowd that large sit quietly for that long. It was beautiful, though. It was very revealing about who he is.
Very much so. Yeah, very.
Yeah.
So that song, to come back to Murder Most Foul, you've said about it, I'll forever associate what we're all going through now with this song.
Yeah.
How so? You started...
Because it felt like a coda, and the times are so frightening and so disorienting, and there's this enormous weight of a sense of the unknown on all of us. And the song frightened me in that way, and felt as if it was a summation.
Right.
So when I found out that he had not written it, in the last few months, like I said, I felt a little relief, but it still feels like that. It has the urgency of that kind of depth and overview. I was thinking about one of my own lines today. This is the oddest thing. Was thinking about crying and how I feel at this moment, and I thought of this line: everything I feel now is hard and fast and true. And Paul, I swear to you, I thought, who wrote that line? What song is that from? And it took me 5 minutes to remember that I had written that line.
I love it. Say it again, please.
Everything I feel now is hard and fast and true. And that's exactly how I feel going through this time with all of you, with you and everyone around me. Everything we feel now is hard and fast and true, because we can't be complacent right now. There's no escape from it.
You know, when you mentioned that line of yours, it made me think of an extraordinary line of Rainer Maria Rilke, where he says, no feeling is final. No
feeling is final. I love Rilke. You have to love the questions.
Yeah, God, do we ever need to? And then maybe slowly we will get into the realm of the answers. I know that somebody else who's been important to you just yesterday is that you've been listening to Sam Cooke. And you, particularly the song where he says, change is gonna come. What kind of change, if we are so hopeful as to believe in it, do you think will come? Or differently put, what kind of change do you hope will come?
Well, first, context, which is I was listening to Sam Cooke because I wanted to listen to something that had the feeling of permanence. That song and Sam Cooke as an artist will last. He's bedrock. He'll be here forever. He's lasted as long as he has. He's gone, but his voice lives on. What do I hope changes? Well, we'll go back to kindness. And really, nuts and bolts things. Oh, we see that the government can provide sustenance for vulnerable people. They can provide school lunches for every child. At least that's what's happening in New York right now.
Yes.
They can feed elderly people for free. They can do all of this service as a government, and nobody screams about socialism.
They could get rid of debts for students.
Yes, We could get rid of student debt. We could do
Imagine
all
that.
of these things. Imagine that. To release them from the bonds of that, young people. So I hope that some of these things become permanent, just in a social, political sense, looking at that. And I hope that I think we're forced to cherish the things because we're losing so many people so quickly. I think we're forced to cherish them.
Right.
And the things we used to take for granted. I know this seems like a cliche, but I hope we can hold on to our sense of impermanence, that things are even more beautiful because they're not always going to be here. We're going to lose more people.
Rosanne, as a coder, would you leave us with some music, or would you prefer not to?
Leave you with music that you could turn to right now,
Or music you might play.
Oh, well, I'm in my bedroom and I don't see a guitar. Well, let's see. Could I just sing something to you a cappella, maybe?
Could you? That would be just so wonderful.
Well, this is my song called 7th Avenue, which is appropriate because I'm in New York City and it's incredibly intense here right now, as you know. The world keeps getting smaller till it closes around my room. And everything I feel now is hard and fast and true. The window is a spotlight on the madness down below. It takes a silent figure to make this place a home. That's all I can sing for you.
Rosanne, I can't wait to see you again when we can. It's really been something speaking to you. I send you a huge virtual hug and a kiss, and I thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for calling me today. I have to say that on this day, being in mourning, it was it's a balm to speak to you about it. It's given me, it's a gift. Thank you very much.
It's been a gift for me, and it will be a gift to everyone who hears this. And take precious care of yourself, please.
You too.
My love to you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
To support this show and Dublab's progressive programming, go to dublab.com/support.